calm sea is an illusion. There is always the unexpected lurking just below the surface. And when chaos erupts, some can swim to the shore, while others will sink into the abyss. Your host, Chris Kane, is an insurance adjuster and also an agent licensed in multiple states. He spent over 30 years helping people with claims, and this podcast is to help business owners, supervisors, and employees to be prepared before and after a work comp injury occurs. Batten down the hatches and join us as we navigate the sea of confusion.
We can look up which later. Well, hi, Dad.
Hello, daughter. How are you?
I'm just thinking about the last episode where, we talk about new buyer's insurance. Now, obviously, that's going to have to change once we get a job now, does it?
Yep, you get the job into the commercial market. There's a whole different set of rules and guidelines, and you're insuring a different type of product, or a different type of risk.
Yeah, so last one, we were trying to go ahead and get insurance if we just never had insurance before, trying to go into our assets now. What if I'm like going into the job field and I'm like, well, obviously I need a job to pay for this insurance. I'm going to be an HR human resource manager. And I walk in there.
Well, H- human resources, especially this day and age, is a very complex job. That you say human resources, you're covering a lot of ground. I mean, from employee benefits to hiring, firing, and all the ADA and other required FMLA government issues you have to deal with.
So when I walk in there in the human resource officer desk, wherever they are, they're like, okay, you're gonna start your job, and I sit down on my desk and I look around. What should I immediately look to like first?
Well, I mean, you'll know, you'll get a list of what your job requirements are. A lot of HR people, they end up dealing with the workers' comp part of commercial policies because the workers' comp, intertwines with a lot of things with the HR. I mean, number one, you got to have your class codes, you got to have your payroll, you got to have all the FEIN numbers, the tax numbers for each of the companies. Most companies just have one. But you get in larger companies, you'll find out you'll have several named insureds where you have several FEIN numbers because sometimes you have companies that put their payroll into one company that doesn't have any employees, but the company that has the employees, that's where all your risks are taken.
So basically, if I look around onto the desk and I'm trying to find the work comp stuff, and I see nothing, it's all barren wasteland there. What do I do?
Well, hopefully you're going to a company that's in the 21st century and doesn't have a bunch of files laying on the desk.
Well,
If you're going into that, you got a problem to begin with other than just insurance.
okay, so I'm on the computer,
That's where you
and
need to be.
the whole desktop is barren.
That's better. The desktop on your computer is where you need to be.
Okay.
What you want to do is make sure that you got most computers. You don't keep personal information on the computers themselves, laptops, the desktops. There, you're usually accessing either a program or you're accessing a central server. And what you want to make sure of is on things that are, you know, medical or personal related, that they're in a secure folder on that computer that only certain people have access to. And that way you keep the things separate that need to be separated. You can have an employee file that's in a company database, but the personal information, such as medical records, things that have to do with work comp claims and things like that, even though work comp is actually outside the venue of HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability Act, which says you got to keep those things private, and then they should be portable. But those type issues need to be kept in a separate. Even if you're on a computer, it needs to be kept in a separate area on the server to secure.
Okay. So basically, when anybody new goes into the job and they go up to my desk and I have the desktop pulled up with the program, and they just hand me like their medical form, I just type it up into the program, and I hit enter.
Well,
So
actually, they don't need to be. You need to have it scanned to your computer, and I keep the piece of paper. Number one, give them the piece of paper back. You scan it up to your computer. You save it into that secure. You can label it whatever you need to be able to note that it's secure and confidential and whose it is and where it is on the server that you keep the secure information. But you hand that paper back to them. You don't want this day and age. You don't want to keep eating paper. Paper's the one thing that you can't keep control of or know where it goes. You got a file on that computer. You can tell who accesses it. You can tell who downloaded it, who printed it. All those things are really embedded into that computer system. Most companies have HR programs, which are most of the time in the cloud. They're all password protected. Only certain people have access to it. Those are going to be your more high-end companies. The middle-sized to small companies are going to have less expensive options to do, which can be just as secure if you do all the right things.
So with the options, on the last one you said that anybody can look around into the market and be like, oh, I want any type of insurance and whatnot. However, how does that change when you go into a company with an HR department? Like how the company chooses, how does that affect
Well,
your
I
other
mean, the
insurance?
company doesn't usually have a risk management department. It usually falls onto the HR because it's one of those things that most people don't want to deal with, and that's what usually HR ends up dealing with. But basically, you go into the market. It's not like looking for personal insurance. I mean, personal insurance, you're dealing with one person. You're dealing with limited assets. You get into commercial insurance, your risks are a whole lot different because you're dealing with a group of employees. You're dealing with larger, most of the time, larger assets, payrolls to cover those employees, things of that nature. So the one things you got to look at is what's the worst case scenario. Let's say I've got a contracting company and I'm sitting in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I do work in Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. Well, for workers' comp, I got to make sure that my insurance policy for workers' comp covers those three states. And where you find that it's covered is under coverage A, 3A on your insurance policy. And it will list all the states that you're covered in. And then I'll have 3C coverage, which is the states you have an option of being covered in. But if you're a contractor, you want to make sure that your company is licensed right in Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama, and they've got those states listed. Workers' comp is state specific, whereas a lot of your other coverages, like where your plants are, where you're doing work, things of that nature, are site specific. In other words, you got a list of sites. Workers' comp, you got to list the state, and you have to break down the payrolls for those states. You also have to break down the class codes, whether it's an office worker, whether it's a laborer, maybe it's somebody that's doing, installer, all those different categories of employees have different class codes. And that's how you determine the rate. And that's where a lot of people get a little bit mixed up because they don't have the right class code for those employees. And you could be paying a higher rate or even worse, be paying a lower rate. And an auditor finds out about it and you get tagged with the premium midterm. Because most workers' comps when you get into medium-sized buildings are all auditable. They come in, they look at your payroll, they look how you got a class code, they look at the job and make sure that class code's correct. And then you're either going to owe the insurance company money or they're going to owe you. Now, everybody thinks that's great when the insurance company owes you, but you need to really look and see if you're overpaying, because if you're overpaying, you're just giving the insurance company money to hold, and then you get a refund. But if you're under it and you're having to pay, you it's not good for cash flow either, because now you got to stop and make a big payment. What you really want to do as an HR department is monitor the amount everybody's getting paid against your policy, because the policy is going to list what the amount of payroll they expect you to have for that year. It's called forecasting. You don't want to be way above it where you're getting a lot of money back, because that's cut into your cash flow. And you don't want to be way below it where you got all of a sudden pay a bunch of money. The ideal is to try and get as close to that, and nobody hits it exactly. But if you could get close to it, that's where HR and people that do the payroll need to be cognizant. Let's just say we sit there and we go into a slow time and payrolls drop. Well, they need to go to let the carrier and their agent know, hey, our payrolls have dropped. We need to adjust this. Or in the same, what we're experiencing now, payrolls have doubled since the first of the year. So with inflation, raises, trying to keep new employees, whatever it is, you need to let your agent know that you've got higher payrolls. So that way, when you come to audit time, you don't get hit, or renewal time, you don't get hit with this, huge increase that you're not expecting. So that's from the HR standpoint what you need to do. Now, to add on to that, a lot of companies have basically where they can take the payroll and they can do a monthly audit. It's almost like a monthly audit of the premium. We've got several companies that do that, where is basically the premiums determined every month. For example, if you got a contractor or a manufacturer that shuts down at Christmas time because they retool, or they shut down in July, auto manufacturer, they're going from the 2023 cars to the 2024 cars. They'll shut down. Everybody takes their vacation. That's the people that are there to retool. Well, during that time, obviously the payroll drops to just about nothing. So if you're on one of those plans, while those months that you have zero or next to it, while you don't pay a lot of premium, then when you come back and you start knocking it through the roof, then the premium goes up. So when you get at the end, usually there's not any difference in the payrolls. But again, it depends on how sophisticated your HR is and whether the insurance company you're dealing with has the capabilities of doing that.
So basically, out of all this, you're not supposed to obviously, you need to be in the right little golden egg area, but just a little bit over. Not like you're paying so much to where it's just permanent insurance, but just a little over instead of just a little under.
Yeah, if you err on the side of caution where you pay just a little bit over, you're always better off, because it's always easier to put a credit in for your bosses than it is to go and say, hey, I need to pay something extra on the insurance. But what you want to avoid is, getting that super large, refund. Then everybody's going to say, well, where did this money come from? So you want to make it, like you said, you want to make it not the golden egg, but just that right above the margin line or the water line, where you're always getting some back, but you're not super overpaying.
Well, that's fair. And put that on my desktop next to the program and burn all the papers.
Shred them, burn. A good shred company is the way to go. Paper documents are really an issue. I mean, more so than what people mean. In my office, we have no filing cabinets. I think we got one or two, but most of the paper that's out is what we're working on or what people sent to us. What we do is make sure we get it scanned into our system, and then we shred the paper. And our system's secure that only certain people can get to the areas that need to be in those. So, and we're dealing with a lot of different clients. So, obviously we have people that can access certain points outside of our company to do certain things like issue a certificate or whatever we've got them set for. But even at that, we know who they are and we've got their security set and we monitor it.
So what I'm learning is that, thank goodness Lauren Kane's not in HR, human resources.
No. I think HR is a commendable place to be. If you want to learn all the details, I mean, I've worked with many HR people and it's very fascinating what they have to deal with. And some of it's just unbelievable what they have to deal with, but especially these days. But, it's a good place to learn, just the same way as working for an insurance company. I think everybody ought to go through the claims department just for the mere fact that that's where all the money is spent and where you try to make things right. And, same way with HR. You're dealing with the people, you're dealing with the problems. If you can handle that job, all the rest of it seems easy. And I mean, everybody to some extent interacts with HR. It doesn't matter who you are. Same way with insurance companies. They all have to interact with their claims department. And I think the ones that don't have their upper management leadership go through that process, they don't have an understanding of what they're doing. Same way with the HR. Most leaders should come out of the HR department because they know to the granular of what's going on, from what they're having to pay in benefits, what they're having to pay here, what they're paying in workers' comp, the amount of time it takes to get stuff together for when you have a claim. Those type things are all issues that if you hadn't been there, you just don't understand. I can tell you all day long, but when you sit there and you got 15, 20 people lighting up your phone, your email's going crazy, and you're trying to get something done, it does get to be hectic to say the least. And that's where you end up with these big piles of paper and big long list of emails that you got to go through.
So as someone who worked with work comp for a long time, and of course you have to deal with a lot of HR people, what is the number one pitfall that HR people will fall into, that's work comp related, that they should be aware of?
Well, the one thing that was sort of my pet peeve was, we were getting ready to let them go, but decided not to, and then they had the work comp claim. That's a question. I think that's always a pet peeve of mine from the claim side. It's, you had the opportunity to let this person go so they wouldn't claim to be hurt or actually get hurt, whatever the case may be. Because if they're having problems that they need to be referred to HR, they really don't need to be out there with all the other employees, because not only is it a danger to them, what always got me really upset is when you had somebody that shouldn't have been there that does something that gets somebody else hurt that didn't have anything to do. So everybody thinks it's okay just to shove it under the rug, but I think for an HR person, I think you got to address each one of them, and you got to do it the same for everybody. That's the main thing with each HR. That's where companies get off track, and you end up with a lot of EPLI claims and management claims. Is where, well, I'm gonna let this guy do what he wants to, but I'm not gonna let this other person do it. And then something goes off the track, and then you've obviously prejudiced that person or done something that shouldn't have been done. So you need to make sure you're in HR that you do everything the same. It should be very regimented. You should have, your procedures down. The other thing is understanding what states they're in as far as work comp. If you start off, you're in Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and you get a job in, let's just say, Texas. Well, heck, you send your employees out there, one of them gets hurt. you don't have workers' comp coverage because you don't have it listed on your policy unless you got an all 50 states endorsement, which most companies don't do unless you are a big company. But you need to make sure before you send people out that you got coverage for them. You got to make sure you got coverage for them on their liability side. You got to make sure you got coverage for the property. A lot of people just don't think about it, especially contractors. When you get into builder's risk, they get a bunch of equipment and you know fixtures for new projects and building materials, and then somebody comes out there and steals them. Well, that's usually not covered on a lot of commercial policies. It usually falls under a builder's risk policy, which is a totally different policy. Now, some carriers do extend coverage if it's on a commercial policy, but if it's on a regular POP or a business owner policy, there's limitations to what's covered.
So basically, a Chattanooga company in like Tennessee, they're looking down and they have like a request to go work out in Texas and whatnot. And how quick can they go ahead and update that coverage before they send somebody out?
Well, they need to let the agent know that they're getting ready to go out there, before it happens. What usually happens is they go out there and somebody, a contractor or somebody else says, I need a certificate of insurance. They call the agent, and the agent goes, we can't do that. You don't have coverage out there. Then everybody's in a scramble. Because, there's a lot of regional insurance companies. Not all insurance companies are coast to coast. Even the ones that are in 50 states are very limited in some states on where they write. Plus, you've got about 4 or 5 states that are monopolistic on their work comp, which means you can only buy it from the state itself. So that's a whole other different, ball of wax, because you have to go straight to the state to get your coverage. Now, a lot of times the agent can get it for you through that way. Then you get in places like New York. I mean, New York, you got to buy the work comp coverage, but you also have the state requires you to buy a disability policy for each of your employees. So in other words, they want, if the work comp doesn't cover it, they want to be covered under disability, which is a lot of extra steps that just can't be done in a day. You got to have your payrolls, you got to have your classes of employees and everything like that out there. And that's one of the things that puts everybody on tilt. You're trying to get all this stuff done. And, if you don't have a certificate, if you're working for another contractor or another business, they may tell you that you're just going to have to wait until you get started. Well, you're paying people to sit there and wait. You're losing money. So it can be hectic at best. And as an HR person, I would always want to be that person that's ahead and say, hey, have you thought of this? Have you gone through this? And really think more like a risk manager, because even though those are 2 separate jobs, a lot of them overlap. So if you keep that in mind and look at everything from your risk on top of your HR duties, it makes it a whole lot easier and makes it less stress, because the last thing you do is, everybody's looking at you to get something done because the company's sitting there can't work.
So say with the Chattanooga like company, instead, like they're like, oh, maybe we'll go ahead and work in like Texas. We're just kind of thinking of it. So the HR department should go ahead and just quickly like go ahead and plan for that, go out and get a coverage just in case.
Well, they should at least make the phone call to the agent and say, hey, we're looking at this. Can you go ahead and make sure we got availability to get coverage? If there's anything special we need to do, let us know so we're not behind the 8 ball.
That's good.
But again, it all comes down to, number one, you got to be organized. Number 2, you got to have your procedures of what you need to do. And some things will fall outside that. But if you got your basic procedures of how to handle things, and then being able to execute it, number 3, is the main thing. If you can keep those things going, then the rest of it will fall in place, or the outliers, different things you can handle without just, you know, stopping all the operations.
So everybody working together makes a dream team.
Oh, it
That's pretty
does.
much.
Communication's key. I mean, communications from just, two guys working on a job site trying to back a trailer to communications in the armed forces. That's the one thing that they focus more on, because we can't communicate. You don't know where to shoot. You don't know where to go. I mean, you got the same thing with your company. If you're not communicating, if leadership's not communicating to you what they plan to do, you can't get it done. And I mean, vice versa. If you're not communicating with leadership that, hey, we need this, or, have we thought about this, then it's not going to get done. But communication's key to everything.
Any other words that they should have other than just communication, or
Just be organized. Don't try to do everything at once, but have things planned out on different scenarios. If you know you're going to have jobs, or you know you're going to be expanded, let your agent know. Let's say we're getting ready to do this. You may be in with a regional carrier that may write Tennessee and Alabama and Georgia, but they may not write Texas. So you're going to have to go look someplace else for coverage, or you may have to look for a different company to write everything. But you've got to be systematically. And the last thing you want to do is have somebody get hurt and you don't have coverage, and they're actually the company's having to foot the bill.
well, there's a lot to learn at the first day of an HR office. The program up and my papers on fire in the background.
Oh yeah. Any other questions?
Not at the moment.
Well, everybody be safe.
Thank you for your support of this podcast. For additional information, please visit our website, workcompchaos.com. All links available in the description below. Until next time, fair winds and following seas.